to find my soul, a journey far from home, lost in a life I made. And I've been round in circles, living for the moment. I know I ran so far, was acting kinda crazy, coming up with empty. Felt like I lost my heart. Now I found a lover, it's clearer than the deep blue skies. It's true, you were right there. I can see it in the days gone by. I see you in the days gone by. Your promise never left my side. I know sometimes I tried to give up, still you called me when I fell from high. I see you in the days gone by. You took my fragile fate and didn't hesitate. Your love in every scar, passion with no restraints, held back the darkest days. So now my life is yours. You've got me when I'm broken, you're with me when I'm hopeless. I know you're never far. Your mercy has no ending and perseveres unfailing. You'll always have my heart. Now I found a lover, it's clearer than the deep blue skies. It's true, you were right there. I can see it in the days gone by. I see you in the days gone by. Your promise never left my side. I know sometimes I tried to give up, still you called me when I fell from high. I see you in the days gone by. See you in the days gone by. See you in the days gone by. And I need you every day, 'cause I see you in the days gone by. Your promise never left my side. I know sometimes I tried to give up, so you called me when I fell from high. I see you in the days gone by.
You're on my mind again. Use my heart to listen in. Move me with your words, so I know which way to turn. It's a dream away to feel free and falling for you. It's a risk I'll take if there's healing long to feel true, to see if it resembles you and all the wonders you bring. I feel I'm falling softly. It's a dream away, to feel free and falling for you. It's a risk I'll take. If there's healing in the hurts I feel.
Thanks for watching today. This is the second week of a series that we're in, that we really are trying to do the next right thing and understand what that is. Today I'm with Brett, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things. So if you don't know Brett, I'm sure you will by the end of the time, but Brett's been on staff here for about 4 years, one of our teaching pastors. You know, it's we talk about the next right thing or doing the next right thing. There's so many different areas that we want to talk about. But before we jump into that, I just want to take a moment and tell you that, you know, the coronavirus is still out there, and we are back online for a particular reason. One is our local area has increased cases. We're trying to be a little more cautious. We're online. We do have an excellent online platform for you. So I just want to let you know, in a few weeks, and we can't say exactly when, we'll be back and on site service again. But just be patient with us, and I think we'll be okay. So let me start today with a story. Recently, I went to see my dermatologist over on Cattleman Road, and as I pulled up front and parked, I walked up to the front door of the dermatology building. And as I did, there was a guy yelling. And at first, I thought he was yelling at me, waving his hands and yelling. And as he was yelling, it took me a second to understand what he was saying. But when I got up to him, he was sitting in a wheelchair with his feet on the asphalt, and a car was just pulling away as he was yelling. And it was his wife. She got out of the car and was coming back to him, and he said, "You just ran over my toes." Can you imagine? What I noticed was, you know, he didn't have on a mask. No, just kidding. I didn't know say whether he had a mask or not, but his toes, and he was complaining about his toes, and I walked up, and at first I thought he was shouting at me. When I realized he was shouting at his wife, I felt better. I went inside, and I said, "I think she just ran over his toes." She goes, "Oh, really?" And, of course, the comments, "He's already in a wheelchair, what difference does it make?" are inappropriate. So this just let you know that today, some of the things that we say, you may feel like we're running over your toes. And if we are, forgive us. Not really. We're trying to be as close as we can to where our hearts need to be. And hopefully at the end of this teaching, there'll be some things that you learn. I know that as we work through this, we've learned some things together. But we're talking about, what is the right thing? So it's estimated that adults make over 35,000 decisions in a day. They make about, a study at Cornell University said that Americans make 200 decisions a day just over food. Decisions versus indecisions. Some people are more decisive than others, and you know them, some easy with decisions, some not so easy. But we'll start with some questions. But Brad, what do you think are the enemies of decision making?
I think the primary enemy of decision making is the fear of uncertainty. I think you can probably trace most enemies of decision making to that fear. What's going to happen if I make this decision? What's going to happen if I make that decision? So I would say that's the main contributor.
Okay. It has been said, there's a quote, good decisions come from experience, and experience comes from bad decisions.
Yes, that's a great quote.
And that's part of life. But so with that in mind, let me ask, have you ever made a bad decision?
No.
Right. Well, tell me about one that you didn't make.
I stole from my boss.
Wait. Has that been since you've been working here? I just want to know if this is confession.
I didn't want to mention which boss. So. No. I learned some good lessons back then. It was when I was a teenager. I was working at a gas station here in town, and my buddy and I were on the same shift. It was a late shift. We were hungry. We had to fix some tires. We had to take in some car washes. And the way the system worked was, if you bought gas, the car wash cost $1. If you didn't buy gas and you wanted a car wash, it was $2. So what we decided to do is keep $1 from all the $2 car washes and mark them as $1 car washes until we could buy some pizza. And so we started doing that. That was a bad decision.
What was bad about it?
Well, the boss figured out that our $1 car washes were disproportionate compared to others to the $2 car washes. So they called us out on it.
So it was a bad decision, particularly when the boss found out.
Yes.
Yeah.
I struggled with whether or not to be honest about taking the money, and so did my buddy. We were called in separately. And when I went in, I confessed that I had taken the money. When he went in, he didn't. But I didn't know what I was going to do. Last second, I decided to be honest. And doing that ended up being a good decision within that framework. And I kept my job, and my buddy was fired.
So sometimes you can make a bad decision, but then follow it with a good decision.
Sure.
So it's not just one bad decision leads to another bad decision to another bad decision. There is correction that could happen. Mm-hmm. So
that quote really applies here. Good decisions come from experience. Experience comes from bad decisions. Right. I really learned a lot, not only from that decision, but because of the way that my boss handled it, and the value of being honest and owning up to what you do.
But we make decisions in life. I mean, I'm very decisive to a fault, and I make a lot of decisions, 200 a day just on food. So I'm very decisive about what I'm going to eat or not going to eat. But also,
you decided to count them.
Yeah, and but I think there are times in our life where you go back and you say, boy, I had 3 kids. I was pastoring a small church in North Florida, and I made a decision to enter Florida State. And for some people, they seem to be able to change their mind easier than I do. When I make a decision, I want the decision to be good, and I'm a finisher. So you start something, and I'm compelled to finish. So even if the decision maybe could have been a different decision, I live as if it's the best decision that I could make at the time, and I see it through. And I think it's more healthy for me. So making decisions. Some of you are out there, you're thinking, well, I made decisions, where I went to school, what degree I had, or maybe I didn't go to school, what career profession I chose, the person you chose to to love in your life, and maybe that didn't work out. Maybe the decision was to get out of that relationship or get out of that, maybe it's abusive or not. But so many different decisions we make, and we just can't always keep looking back. So you can spend a lot of your life looking in the rearview mirror or looking out of the front windshield.
Better to do that.
And I prefer not to look out of the rearview mirror every day of my life. Some decisions we made recently. One had been the services at Suncoast. You know, we decided because of the coronavirus to shut down for a series. We didn't know how long. We were shut down 14 weeks. We opened 1 week. Now we're closed again. And we try to make those decisions based on good information, the best we have at the time. Sure. And people want to know, what is it going to be in the future? And we just don't have the information. So let me move on to ask you a question about mights and maybes.
Yeah.
Mights and maybes. What are the mights and maybes that keep you awake at night, and should they?
Should they? Well, you know, the reality is that making big decisions have big consequences for your life. So, you know, making a judgment call on whether or not they should, you know, keep you up at night is, you'd have to look at every situation, I guess, because they're all unique. But I think there are ways that you can alleviate the angst that's created by the mights and maybes. And this is getting back to the uncertainty thing.
Right.
We like to be as certain as we can, and we should be as certain as we can. There's wisdom there. But there is inevitably many unknowns involved in our decision making. So I've found over the years that one of the things that's helped me most about being decisive and being wise about my decisions is just admitting the truth that there are a lot of unknowns. What I've realized is that living in fear of making decisions is something that can lead to a paralysis. And the one thing we can say for sure is that when we decide not to decide, that ends up holding power over us.
I think sometimes I choose not to make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't, and that's a good choice. That's a decision. But when I don't make a decision because I'm just so afraid that I just don't know what to do,
Right.
then I don't think that's healthy. I have a friend of mine who, he rarely makes quick decisions. He needs to have 100% of the information in before he makes a decision. When we're afraid or we don't make either A or B decisions, it cripples us and it holds power over us. And there's a great quote, and it says, "It doesn't matter what the specific decision is, unmade decisions hold power. Like toddlers at our feet right before dinner, they follow us around and refuse to leave us alone until we face them head on and either pick them up or at some point point them in the right direction. If we only knew what the right direction was." I mean, sometimes these unmade decisions. They're like kids. So tell us about, though, a time that Arlene had to make a decision. Tell me about that story.
Yeah. We were in our early 40s, and Arlene was struggling with, and it was keeping her up at night, with the idea of going back to school. So she had gotten her 2-year way back when she was young, and had this lifelong dream of teaching kids, right? And she was struggling. Should I go back to school? Am I too old? Maybe I'm not going to be able to keep up with college these days. Maybe it's going to place too big a burden on the family. Lots of different things that she was mulling over. So as we talked about it, we said, let's get together with Kevin and see, get his input on it. He kind of faults on the side of rationality, you know, so he leans heavy on that way of thinking. And I remember after she told Kevin about all the angst she was having about this decision, he focused in on two things. He said, "So this is a lifelong dream, you said?" She said, "Yes." "And you're worried that you're going to be 45 years old by the time you can actually teach?" "Yes." He said, "Well, if it's a lifelong dream, then when you're 45, you're either going to be 45 years old looking back at a dream that you had, or you're going to be realizing it. There's your choice."
That's brilliant.
So she went back to school.
Yep. So 2 years from now, 3 years from now, you're going to be 45 with or without the degree,
Yes.
and it's up to you.
Yeah.
No, I think that's great insights and a good story about deciding what to do based on the information you have.
And it leads to something that you said the other day when we were talking about this. I like to ask the question, you said, what makes your heart sing? And that's really what Kevin was honed in on there in Arlene's situation. He listened to her and he realized the idea of teaching children is something that makes Arlene's heart sing. And it does, and she's never regretted that decision.
No, I agree with that too. And we hear that a lot. I mean, Susan talks about that a lot, what makes your heart sing. In the children's area, when we talk about children's directors, what makes your heart sing is if it's teaching children, then that's what you should do. If teaching children makes your heart cringe, that's probably not the right thing for you. So what is it that makes your heart sing? And that's a good question for anyone to ask, because you need to gravitate toward those strengths.
I just remembered a story where you actually asked me that question.
All right.
We got together, this was years ago before I worked here. We got together for coffee at that Starbucks when it first opened on Clark. And I was thinking about leaving the ministry. And you listened and you said, well, what is it about ministry that makes your heart sing? Anything? I said, yeah, I love to see the light bulb go on. I love to see people's their eyes light up, rather, when they grab hold of something valuable. And that led me to make the decision that I was going to stay in ministry.
Right. And there are things that make our heart sing, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, as a pastor, I got to tell you, there's lots of things to make my heart sing. It's helping people, it's loving people, just being in community. So all of you are helping my heart sing, but it's so much easier when there's 10 or 20 times that amount in the room. And people say, well, preaching, if you've there's not much difference preaching to 8 as there is to 800. I said, a person that says that is never taught to 800. There's so much energy, and that energy makes my heart sing. And I agree with you, the light coming on, seeing them get it for the first time, and I think those are important things to make our hearts sing. So let's shift through a little bit more and talk about the next subject area. So it's a second concept. So the first one's about making decisions, right or wrong. Do you have enough information? Probably not. You make good decisions based on experience. You get experience from bad decisions. We understand that. But there's a secondary for us to consider today. It's a concept of soul minimalism. What is a soul minimalist? What is that?
A soul minimalist, we're taking this from a book that's titled The Next Right Thing. A soul minimalist, she basically defines as someone who makes the decision to declutter their soul. So what does that mean, to declutter the soul?
Well, and then we have to say, well, what is a soul? So in the Hebrew, the word soul is nephesh, and it really means life essence. So if you read a lot of the ancient culture, you realize the reason the life efesh, the soul, was equated to blood, or sometimes even the spirit. So either breath or blood. And if an animal doesn't have blood, it's not alive. When you sacrifice an animal, you don't drink the blood because that's its soul in some aspect. And today we say, psychologically, soul has a different connotation. So from a psychological perspective, what do you think soul is?
Yeah, it's, some refer to it as your consciousness, your ability to be self-aware, your self in that sense, But I think that deserves a little more explanation.
Okay.
In the Remind series that you just finished, you talked about the internal saboteur, which Jung referred to as the shadow, or others refer to as the unconscious self. Right? So I really think that the soul is this emergent self that arises from both the unconscious and the conscious existence, the experiences that we have. In the way that our consciousness and our unconsciousness deals with those things. So the more that we're willing to declutter the soul, so to speak, get the things out of the way that block us unconsciously, like the internal saboteur.
Right.
The more that we're willing to do that and declutter the soul, the more we'll become aware of what was unconsciously making decisions for us anyway.
Okay. So how do we get rid of a lot of the clutter in the soul? I mean, that's a very, whether it's your unconsciousness, your consciousness connection with your consciousness, whether it's your life essence, that which is the fabric that makes you who you are, but sometimes that gets cluttered. So how do we unclutter? And so let me make a suggestion. I have a friend of mine who is a hoarder. You know what a hoarder is? It's a person that takes things and they never get rid of anything. And he actually has properties that he keeps things. And you can say, well, how many of those do you have? Well, I've got 2 or 3 of those. Well, how many do you need? I need them all. But they're sitting in storage. I know, but someday I may need them, and I got a great deal on them. So all of a sudden they start accumulating and accumulating. Can you imagine? Let's put you in a position where you never take your trash out. Would that be awkward? Say, yeah, I'm just going to. What are you going to do with it? First of all, I'm going to put it in one of my kids' rooms because they'd never know it was there. So you just start filling it in there, and you fill up that room, and the next thing you know, you go, that room is full, so I have to fill up something else. And you get all the trash. Every garage sale, people give you everything that you ever want. They just give it to you, and you bring home carload after carload. Before long, you never get rid of anything. Your house is so full of stuff. What do? Well, you got to get rid of some stuff. If that's your soul, and you're always taking another hit or adding something to your life, to your schedule, to your dynamic, to your emotional damage, and you never take time to clean out some stuff, you'll never find, I think, what the authentic person that you can be. I don't think you'll find your true self.
Totally agree.
So how do you get rid of some of the clutter in our soul?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to admit that the way the author puts it, all the input that we take in, it's automatic, man. We have these senses. It's the way we're wired. We have these brains that are differential engines. They're looking for contrast between this and that. And so all this input's coming in all the time automatically, but the output is very infrequent, and it's not automatic. It's something that takes intentionality. So we have to be intentional if we're going to use a current term, flatten the curve.
Right. Right.
This exponential rate at which we take in information. And so you have to be intentional about that if you're going to stop some of it. So an example would be, you brought up some things about social media.
Right. You could take a social media break, and this is recommended by some. And what if I took a break to where say, okay, for 1 hour a day, I'm not going to have my phone on or my computer on. I'm going to take a break from electronics media, 1 hour a day. And then you say, okay, then I'm going to do 1 day a month to where I'm not going to have my phone on, and I'm just not going to tune into it. And then 1 week a year, for 1 week, I'm going to do a total electronics fasting. No Facebook, no Twitter, no Instagram, none of those things that keep feeding into us. And so many people are so addicted to those things, they need to get out of the handle of that.
Yes.
So it may be some way to declutter your mind and your heart. Other things could be grief, distress, things that if you don't stop and say, I need to let some of this stuff go, you just postpone it. I talked about that last week when I talked about my dad, is you just push it off. But someday the day of reckoning will come, and you need to have that cleansing of your heart on a regular basis and your soul to get some of this stuff out. And I think that's an excellent concept.
That unconscious side of you is doing something with all that input, whether you're conscious of it or not. And it's going to end up making choices based on that input.
Right.
And so why not make that conscious? And the only way to do that is to be still. Take, the way the author put it was, you take the 5 minutes that you find in your day where you can actually be still and just be present with God the way that God's present with you.
Right.
And get some of that clutter out of the soul.
Oh, I agree. And sometimes it's during this time of pandemic, some of you have really boosted Amazon stock significantly. You can't go to Target, Walmart, or wherever, so you just go to Amazon. And I mean, they deliver. And I know it's at my house. So we see a lot of Amazon stuff going on. But what does it mean when you start accumulating all this stuff? And at some point you go, well, I need to get rid of some of the stuff I'm accumulating. And I think that's an important part of the soul clutter. Which leads me to this thing. What does it mean when you buy all this stuff and that which you own owns you?
Yeah.
I will tell you, there's a long story, a long time ago. My kids were young. My wife said, we need a swing set. So she talked to her mom and dad, and they said, we'll help with that. So they bought this really nice galvanized swing set. And the problem is it comes in a little box or multiple big boxes. And here, we bought this for you. Now you can put it together. So for 2 days of my life, I put together the swing set for the kids. And I mean, you put it together, and I mean, it's brutal. And now I have a rule where if it has to be put together, do not order it. I will not put it together. But back then, I put it together, get the swing set up, take about 2 days. It's beautiful. And then you read the very last line. It says, reminder, you need to tighten every bolt, every screw, every 30 days, or your children's life could be in jeopardy. So this thing, if you don't spend the rest of your life tightening your swing set, it's going to eat your kids. I just don't think that's appropriate. But that's the prime example of what happens when that which you own owns you. So the rest of my life, I spend a certain amount of any day I have off, I have to go be out, and I got to tighten all the nuts and bolts of the swing set. One example, and it could be automobiles, boats, jet skis, bicycles, you name it, the list goes on and on, to where people just keep accumulating, and all of a sudden that which they own, I need a bigger garage to hold all the stuff that I have because it begins to own me. Minimalizing those things physically with possessions, but also realizing I need to take that same area of my soul. I need to let so many things go and focus on that which is most important. And it's the love of God, family, community. Those are the things that really matter.
Yes.
It's not just the possessions that we have. So if you were to do that, tell me about some of the other things that you would do. Prayer, meditation. What do you?
Yes.
What kind of practice do you do?
Yeah, and people sometimes are intimidated by those words, but it's really not rocket science. It really is just taking time to be quiet. If you are constantly unsettled by all this input, you're going to be owned by the decisions that your unconscious self is making based on all that input. So if you're going to make it conscious, you've got to be quiet. You've got to be still. You've got to know who you are. And you do that best in the presence of God, an intentional time sitting in the presence of God. So yes, I do that every day. And it begins with simply being quiet, just silent. And if I need to focus on something, I'll focus on my breathing so that my mind's not traveling off and wandering through all the things that are worrying me. The other thing is to get some perspective about how important your decisions are. And I do that. This is what works for me. I do that by looking at the main goal, I call it, or theologians call it the goal of creation.
Right.
So what is that? Well, I've come to believe that the goal of creation is for humanity to grow into this freedom where they choose to be in relationship with God and each other. The creation, in fact. And when I filter all of my decision making and even my whole life as I'm taking in all this input through that lens, it helps me to keep things in perspective.
Right.
That my decisions, even when I make the wrong ones, I exist in this kingdom of love. I am loved by my Father, and the consequences of my decisions, they matter, but they're always useful in His hands.
Right.
Even the bad ones.
So it's perspective.
Yeah.
Many times. It puts
It's very
things back in
liberating.
perspective.
Yeah.
I make a decision to quiet myself. I make a decision to spend time with God. I make a decision to see the big picture.
Yes.
Those are all decisions. So that's what we want to talk about today. And we're going to talk more about this next week. So let me say a prayer for you. Father, thank you for your love and grace in our lives. Thank you for this moment. We decide to watch something like this. We decide to realign our hearts. We decide to minimalize our souls and the activity. Help us to be more in tune with you. Help us that the things that we own don't own us, but that you own us and you're viable in our lives. Do what only you can do in our hearts today, we pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen.
So let me tell you a story in closing. Just recently, Becky and I were riding around the neighborhood on our bikes. We do that early in the morning. And as we ride around the neighborhood, there's a lady that comes by jogging. And because of social distancing, we're on one side of the road, and she's 30 feet on the other side of the road outside. But as she runs up past us, she puts a mask up. And I see that, and we make another lap around. We see this lady again. The second time we come near her, she doesn't have a mask, but she puts a mask up when she goes by us. And I looked over at my wife. I said, is that just a little bit offensive to you? That when you come by, it's like she puts a mask up like we're kind of give her some disease? And then my wife sees things through a different lens. She said, well, maybe she's not trying to offend us. Maybe she's trying to protect us. Maybe she's been in quarantine, or maybe she has some issues. Maybe she just wants to be sure that whatever she has doesn't affect us. And I thought, that is why I married her. She sees things through a different lens and often gives me a greater perspective. Then in my quiet time before God, I have the same conversation. He seems to turn things around, and all of a sudden I see it in his perspective, and my life is so much better. So today I want to remind you, as you make your decisions, understand this: God is not doing all this to you. He's the one who cares for you, and he loves you today, and so do we. Thanks for watching.